Awesome. Well, we are officially at 2:01 Central Time, and so we are going to go ahead and get started. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Super excited to spend some time with you, and we appreciate you spending time with us. Today, you're going to be hearing from Target, and hopefully you know of Target, the big red bullseye. And you're going to hear from the Pride Plus Business Council, and what we're going to share today is really just a perspective on some of the best practices that we've learned working here in a virtual environment. But I wanted to share a little bit of perspective on Pride Plus. Pride Plus is something we call a business council at Target. You may know that as an ERG or a BRG. And for us, it started in the early 90s when we were part of the Dayton Hudson Corporation. Over those years, it's gone through a number of name changes from the GLBT network through the LGBTQIA Business Council and now known as Pride Plus. And I think, we share that because it's really about a journey. And so what we're going to share is a little bit about the journey we've been on. I'm excited to say that the Pride Plus Council today, we have a reach of about 4,500 people within the organization in terms of folks who have raised their hand to be a part of it. It is led with 3 executive sponsors as well as 3 tri chairs, and we can talk a little bit more of that later. So with that, we can go on to the next slide, and I can actually introduce who you're hearing from today. So my name is Carlos Saavedra. I am super excited to be joining as one of the executive sponsors. I want to just make sure that the content is up. So if folks could just say in the chat if they can see the content we're presenting.
Okay, 1 second then. All right, looks like you're seeing it now. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Thanks, Stephanie. So my name is Carlos Saavedra. My pronouns are he, him. I am currently the Vice President of Brand Management for Target. And I am also one of the executive sponsors for Pride Plus. And I will let Stephanie, my co-lead here, introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Ratanis. I'm a senior software engineer at Target. And I am on the nonprofit partnerships pillar of the Pride Plus Business Council. And this is actually my first Out and Equal. So I'm super excited to be here, and it's been really great so far, and feel very privileged to get to share my first time as well.
Awesome. Well, hopefully a warm welcome for Stephanie, her first Out and Equal. I was telling Stephanie earlier that my first one was in 2004 in Arizona, and I've had a chance to attend a number of times since then. So we are definitely representing different ends of that spectrum. So as we think about the time we're going to spend today, it really is grounded in Target's purpose. And at Target, that purpose is to helping all families discover the joy of everyday life. And that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about at Target, and really, really making sure that we're bringing that to life in a number of ways. Specifically for today, what we're going to talk through is really how we are engaging with our nonprofit partners in this new virtual world. Certainly, the pandemic has changed the way we work across the board. And volunteering and in-person events have always been a really key part of how we engage with our nonprofit partners. And so as we entered this new era, we really had to think about how can we engage, how can we still continue to support, but in a way that really reflects this new environment, because we know virtual is here to stay. And so for us, we know that virtual will be a component as we move forward. And so from that, the Pride Plus Business Council Spotlight Series was created. And so for us, this was about how do we continue to support, and how do we then really make sure that we're continuing to have an impact in the communities that we serve. And so today we'll share about what we learned, the challenges that we face in putting on those events, and really how you can be successful to the degree you're looking to engage your nonprofit or your partners in a virtual environment. I'll also put in a shameless plug for another Target event that is happening that is captured in the Summit on Demand. It's called Assortment for All. And it's a really compelling look at an experience that Target had with a book that showed up in our assortment that was really harmful to the trans community. And really it was about how we went about making sure that we could make an assortment that was really engaging and really reflective of the values that we hold as a company. So I definitely encourage you to check that out as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Stephanie.
All right, so just jump right in. So I just want to mention this isn't our first go at this. This is actually our third time for the nonprofit partnerships pillar presenting it out in Equal. And in the past, we have presented on our skills-based volunteering event, which then went virtual last year. And so we learned a lot from that experience. And then we have a year of doing the Spotlight series under our belts. So we have learned quite a few things, and we really want to share them with everyone because running a successful virtual event is not always super intuitive. And also, if anyone has anything they want to share that they've learned from doing virtual events, please put them in the chat. We'd love to hear from other people as well. So just to jump right in, the biggest thing about planning a virtual event with a nonprofit partner is the planning. Definitely understanding your community partners' workload and their mental capacity. There's a lot of work that goes on in nonprofits, and the work environment and workload and expectations can be very different from corporate to nonprofit. So really trying to work with them at their pace and figuring out what's a good pace for both groups to work in, and always start early and be flexible. So pretty much everything we learned about the Spotlight series, every month we got a little bit better at getting things going earlier and figuring out how to best communicate with those partners. So within Target, we have simple ways to connect with each other. We have email, we all kind of know we're sitting at our computers. We've got Slack. We don't necessarily have those tools with our nonprofit partners. So meeting regularly became very important, even if it was just a check-in quick on Zoom to say, how's it going? How's that PowerPoint coming? We need these things by next week for our D&I vetting, things like that. We met every week, and it's just good to touch base and not lose sight of the thing that's coming up. So we would usually start meeting a month and a half or 2 months beforehand. Another thing that we learned a lot about was our internal D&I vetting process, which is probably different in every company, but probably a lot the same. Whenever we bring in outside speakers, there's a formal process we have to go through with the D&I folks, and it takes a lot longer than we thought. So definitely getting going on that early and understanding what are the requirements from your D&I department and what the timelines are is super key. And then, so what I want to share on the next slide is our run of show. We created a template that we have in the file section on our session page, which you can download. And it just has some sort of mock event tasks and people and things that we have found to be important when planning. The run of show document maintained a central place for all of the tasks pre-event and during the event, so that there was absolute clarity on who was taking care of what the deadlines were, whether or not they had been done. So we would update that, and because the organizations couldn't necessarily access that on our network, we would send that document as we updated it to them. And it's just really good to have clarity. And you'll see in that document, if you choose to download it, very specific tasks during the presentation, who's running the webinar, who's going to monitor the chat, things like that. And then there's just no questions. until you get to the Q&A section, which I really love, and it can be a really invigorating part of the presentation, and probably the most important part. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about that, and I'm going to pass it back to Carlos just to talk about some of our inclusion efforts at Target and in Pride Plus specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. So for Target, inclusion has been a core value for Target for a long time. I mentioned our purpose at the beginning, helping all families discover the joy of everyday life. And we take the word all families that very seriously. And that shows up in everything that we do, and make sure that, how we can think about providing opportunities and access for all of our guests across the country. As we think about it from an overall kind of opening up a conversation, we actually use something that's called the guardrails for inclusion and empathy. And it really gives some perspective, and Stephanie will put a link in the chat for you to take a look at. And it's really saying, how can you create spaces for really productive and relevant conversations? And you'll see in there some really just like a list of things to keep in mind, whether that's, assuming positive intent, really honoring your truth. And one that I love the most is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's something that, as we enter new conversations and as we really kind of look at new spaces, is that it's okay to feel uncomfortable. That means that we're learning, we're challenging ourselves, we're challenging assumptions, and we're really moving forward and towards progress.
Awesome, thank you. So in regards to the Q&A session, another thing that we have been trying to do better, and we're learning more about this every time we do a presentation, is making sure that our event is accessible, making sure we have closed captioning turned on. We've been making it a practice to provide a physical description of ourselves, sharing pronouns. And one thing that we're working on that we have learned a lot about, and especially in partnership with the Disability and Mental Health Business Council at Target, is making PowerPoints more accessible. I went to a training where there was so much content about building out a PowerPoint and how things that are accessible and things that are not, and thinking about screen readers and things like that, and alt text for images. There's a lot to think about that we really want to evolve and grow in. So we're always listening to our community to make things better. And again, if you have anything that you want to add in the chat that you've learned from a Q&A session, how to make it inclusive, how to make it successful, definitely share any experiences that you have. So the actual Q&A session is, like I said earlier, a really important part of the event. And it allows your audience to ask questions to help facilitate conversation around the organization's work or the topic that they tackle. And so running it well is really crucial. So every event we had a chat moderator who would post relevant links to whatever the organization was talking about, reminders of how to ask questions in the Q&A feature, and having someone separate from that being the actual moderator of the Q&A so that they can respond to what people are saying and engage and follow up with other questions that may be related. And again, every time we have a Q&A session, we lead with the guardrails for inclusion and empathy that Carlos was talking about. I put a link to it in the chat, and we also put it in the file section on our session page. So you're welcome to download that. I think they're really helpful. And even though I've seen it a million times, having that there as the setting my mindset right before the Q&A session starts has really been helpful in engaging in inclusive conversation. So with that, I'm going to move on to some of the impacts that we've had and how to measure success. And Carlos is going to speak on that.
Awesome. And before I do, I know we've had folks join throughout, and I just want to take a moment to just kind of bring folks along. So, we're talking to you about, from Target, spotlight series with our nonprofit partners. So in a virtual world, we knew we had to interact with our nonprofit partners in a different way. And so what the team created and what Stephanie has been describing in terms of the work behind that is to say, hey, on a monthly basis, let's get together with with a nonprofit partner and find ways to engage. And that took shape in a number of different ways. Stephanie will share some of that a little bit further on, but saying like, what would be helpful to them? So how do they build awareness? How do we do that in a way that really says, hey, we know we're not going to be able to get together in person, but there are things that we can do that we can drive engagement, we can drive volunteerism, and we can really start to help make an impact. And so that spotlight series, is for us, we wanted to also think about, okay, what impact did we have? And we put on here that ROI is important to track. And that's just true of any, kind of investment of time, money, or resources within an organization, because we want to make sure that we're demonstrating that it's been effective or that we're making progress. But I don't mean ROI in a financial sense. That's not necessarily, how we're thinking about it here within this space. If you can, all the more power to you. For us, this really was about participation, about engagement, and really the impact to the organization in the ways that they were looking to grow, whether that was helping grow their mail list, helping them grow their donor base, and really, helping them make a bit bigger impact within their community. And so for us, that those success metrics varied depending on, the specific partner. Although broadly, again, we were looking at number of attendees, the people who were signing up for those lists as ways to quantify and really show that. But we also, one of the things that we came to love about the virtual environment was that it actually enabled us to have further reach. It allowed us to have attendance from folks who may not have had the opportunity to, take time away from their day or to engage in a way that really, wasn't available to them in an in-person environment. It also, had an intangible impact that I would say around emotional connection. It could start to be, I think I'll be vulnerable here. There's times where it was overwhelming, right? Adapting to this new environment, really, figuring out how you can continue to build connection, build relationship. And so for this was an opportunity for us to maintain some of those emotional connections to our community partners. And then, making sure that we were still growing some of the things around volunteerism. One thing that I wanted to highlight, this is something that we were really excited about, was that with one organization that we partnered with, and now since we have replicated across and started to drive this, is actually leveraging our business. So within the Target app, so if any of you are Target shoppers, and I hope you are, the Target app is called Circle, Target Circle. And through that app, you're able to certainly get rewards on the shopping you do. But I think something that really differentiates it is that through that participation, you're able to vote on community organizations to support. And so, within a local region, we're able to say, hey, here's a list of community partners that Target is working with. And, depending on your passion point, you have areas that that are important to you individually, you can direct your votes to those organizations, which translates into real money and real funding for that organization. And so one of the spotlight partners is called One Heartland. And this was some nonprofit that we've worked with for a number of years. It's based in Minnesota, Target's home state. And it's a program that hosts youth living with or affected by HIV or AIDS, children that are experiencing housing instability, as well as LGBTQIA plus young people and families. And so we nominated One Heartland to be in our Target Circle program. They were selected in one of the recent giving cycles. And so it was, it was a chance for our guests to see things that were aligned with Target's values, and also a way for them to give back. And so they were able to receive thousands of dollars in funding, which is meaningful for an organization of their size. And since then, as I mentioned, we've nominated every one of our spotlight partners. And, we look forward to seeing them continue to show up through the Target app moving forward. So that's what, we think of ROI in a really broad sense, but really at the end of the day, how can we impact the communities we serve? But I'll let hand it over to Stephanie to share some other examples.
Yeah, thank you. So just one quick thing on the Target Circle again. at the end of every presentation, we would have the links and everything available for Target team members to nominate the organization. And so while, we would nominate them as a council or individually, having 100 other people nominate them also really gets the attention of the program. So, and also spreads awareness about the program. It's so easy. You just go in and click a bunch of times, however many votes you have. So some of the other examples of events that we supported was the Aliveness Project, which supports people living with HIV and AIDS. They have a dining out for life event where local restaurants will participate and donate a portion of their proceeds to the organization. And so we promoted that heavily, and they ended up hitting their 150,000 fundraising goal, which is awesome. We also promoted an event that we brought the entire nonprofit pillar team to support the cause for Claire Housing. Again, they provide housing assistance for people living with HIV and AIDS. And those are two really impactful local organizations. And it's just awesome to see like how these things go beyond the virtual presentation, just saying, raising awareness of who they are, speaking on what issues they tackle, and then to see it actually make a difference outside of Target has been really great.
Stephanie, can you talk with them a little bit?
Yeah.
Sorry to pull you back, but how you selected the organizations, like how, like kind of, just how you picked who was part of the Spotlight series?
Yeah, so some of them, I'll actually go to this slide and then go back. So some of them fell very naturally into like a themed month. So for example, one of the spotlights we did was with Reclaim. And they are an organization that provides mental health resources to queer and trans youth. And so we partnered with them and the Disability and Mental Health ERG at Target to put this event together for Mental Health Awareness Month. And similarly with MNPOC Pride, we partnered with the African American ERG at Target for African American History Month. So we have a big list of all the month themes, and we try to use those to stick with the theme. As far as the nonprofits that we work with, they are generally right now, they're all pretty much local to the Twin Cities area. But as we expand efforts, so when we did the skills-based volunteering event, we had people from stores all over the country participate in that event that were Target team members. So we hope to expand that beyond our local reach, especially now that things are so virtual. Before it made sense, we're all going to go to a volunteer event. We're all going to go help out at One Heartland and paint cabins and things like that. But I think changing to the virtual environment has really taught us how much further we can reach, because Target is all over the country. It's not just in Minneapolis.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then so these are the ones that have been spotlighted so far. Every event has just been awesome. I saw a few questions as I was talking about that. Is the retail team part of these events? That has definitely been a difficult thing for the council in general to make sure that people beyond headquarters are all, able to be involved. But we do have people specifically on the council who work on getting those opportunities and things out to the store and retail employees. So I'm not going to lie, it's not perfect yet, but it is definitely something that we are highly conscious of in expanding our reach. And the virtual thing, like I said, with the skills-based volunteering, like it allowed people from all over the country to participate from Target corporate. So that was pretty awesome. And then the other question I'll just also touch on was, what was your audience for these type of sessions? We definitely got bigger reach when we partnered with other ERGs at Target. So I think also one of the important things is we want to present these to people who don't know about them. Like if we're just presenting them to every Pride participant at Target, maybe they already know about this organization or they know about this work. So partnering with like the mental health disability ERG or the African American ERG, we've partnered with the Women's Business Council on another event, has allowed us to add like hundreds of people more to these virtual events that wouldn't have maybe normally seen it. Maybe they aren't on the Pride distro list, things like that. So I would say they range from like 100 to 350 is what we've been seeing so far. I'll just go back to the slide real quick. This is just some Justin and Debbie and myself are the ones who worked on this presentation, and they're the leads on the nonprofit partnerships pillar. They're both awesome. I love the work that we do, and I love that even though I'm a corporate employee, like I can still use my position at Target to connect with the nonprofits in my community. It's been very meaningful for me. Then I mentioned these earlier. These are available in the files section on our session page. Just a virtual run of show example, totally customizable, but just giving you an example of what document we've used to centralize all of the things that need to be done for a virtual event. And then also the Target guardrails for inclusion and empathy, which I just love. And I love leading Q&As with that and keeping those at top of mind. So now we have time for some questions, and I see there's some more in the chat already. A spotlight is where the organization gives a presentation about what they do. Yes, so some of the organizations would give a more general presentation about their work. Some of them would focus around a specific issue, like we had gender justice. They deal with trans legal issues, and they focused on trans women in sports for their presentation. So it was we really left it up to the organization if they wanted to highlight some specific project they were working on, or just what they do in general. And the skills-based volunteering event. So we've presented on this past, I won't go too deeply into it, but people from all over Target will sign up to volunteer and put in skills that they have. Maybe they have project management skills or web design skills, things like that. And then the nonprofits will say, okay, we're rebranding. We need some help looking at the steps we need to do that. Who do we need to reach out to? Maybe we need some design input, things like that. Or another group had a bunch of tech volunteers and they helped them rebuild out their website. So it's really based on what the organizations need and the skills that come into the session. Do you provide funding or compensation to these organizations? So yes, as part of the nonprofits pillar, we give a grant every year. It's changed a little bit. So we used to give one grant to an organization, and we've been giving, I think, 2 grants this year. So it'll be to one of the partners that we work with. It's not necessarily tied to the Spotlight series, but we also will, Target team members get volunteer time. So we encourage them to use them with these organizations and facilitate volunteer events and things like that. Let's see. Do you encourage employees to consider volunteer engagement that is longer term, like serving on a board? I don't know if you can speak to that, Carlos, at all.
Yeah, there's not an active program to like create, those pathways, but it is certainly target both through matching programs, through recognizing those the investments there and amplifying that. There's definitely encouragement to be active in your local community, but and giving the support and able to do that, whether that's as on boards or just playing a really active role. For myself, I have the privilege of sitting as a board member for GLSEN, which is a board or a nonprofit focused on LGBTQ youth, and Target very much is deeply involved with GLSEN, and it gives an opportunity for us to bring those again, values to life in a way that is really tied into where Target is focused. So I wouldn't say there's not a specific program. I'd be curious to hear like kind of how other organizations approach that, because that'd be something we could learn from. But it is certainly, I guess it would be fair to say, welcomed, but not specifically through a program.
Target support the local LGBT centers in the communities where they do business. As far as the council goes, I are mostly focused in the Twin Cities right now, just because that's where the council has been. We definitely would like to expand that. And especially with this virtual world and virtual way to reach people, figuring out how to partner with organizations that are outside of our physical community, because really we've all become part of the same mush together thing on the internet now. So it's much easier to reach people and find these ways to be supportive. And I think part of that too is also just going to one of the other questions about reaching the store employees and the company as a whole to participate in this and support organizations all over. I think the more that we can do that and have active participation in the council across Target, the better chance we'll have of working with nonprofits in that community. And we haven't actually met with our nonprofits in person in some time. So we used to think, okay, we're going to go do a volunteer event. We're going to go to their office and have a chat, things like that. And that stuff's not happening now anyway. So we're realizing that we could actually expand that. But yeah, and it's not just, I think someone shared about their company also having a hard time with factory team members or retail team members being involved in the ERG and things like that. And I think that's probably a whole other talk, because, they make up most of the company really. And they are the ones that people interact with. They're the ones that are actually carrying out like the work and with the people that we, are guests. So I would love to see more discussion around that and ideas as well.
One thing I would add on that is that each Target store, individual Target store, does have some funding to support the local community around them. So now that's not something that we're able to influence at a national level, that because it's meant to be very much grassroots. It's really like, what does that local community need? And so there certainly are support that shows up in a number of ways, because community support is just a really big component of how Target wants to show up and support. But it does, I do think it's interesting of like how we can help. Even that's some of the things that we're working through, is like, how can we drive that engagement? How can we give, whether you're an hourly employee, whether you're or not, like how can you participate and be a part of some of this connection and engagement in service of a cause that we all care deeply about.
Yeah, love that. So there's a question, has Pride Plus identified community partners, and how have you initiated these partners? They mentioned we're struggling to have organizations respond even when offering them money and volunteers. That's very common. And before I worked in coffee or at Target, I spent a lot of time in the nonprofit world, and it's just hard because people are usually way busier than they should be. And I don't think that should be the nature of nonprofits, because I think a lot of awareness about mental health and things like that is helping to change that. But it's just like, they're just so busy. And there are some that we have a list, and every year if we haven't worked with someone in a while, we touch base with them. We try to reach out to them. Sometimes you just got to let them go. But honestly, it's just like, keep trying. And also trying to connect with individuals at that organization. So, maybe you're trying to reach out and you're hitting the info at communityorg.com, and that could be going to everybody, and maybe not everybody's responding to that. That could be going to the executive director, who's outrageously busy. So we found a lot of success identifying like the communications person, or the volunteer coordinator, somebody specific that you can reach out to, as opposed to just generally reaching out to the organization, has been way more successful for us. Let's see. Have you made any attempts to collect metrics from these spotlights? Orgs that have participated saw a bump in donations, volunteer hours, etc. We haven't done a lot of that work specifically, besides the influence around the Target Circle participation. And that's like a direct result that we've seen of being involved with the nonprofit. Definitely something we could, I think a lot of nonprofits are still trying to figure out their volunteer plan in a virtual world as well. So I don't have any specific metrics on that. Definitely more interest, people reaching out to find out more about the organization because they haven't heard of them before. So I think it's more of like a general awareness at this point, as opposed to having like strong specific numbers. But it's definitely something that we're trying to incorporate better, because we want to measure our success, and we want to measure, is this impactful for the organization? It's a reciprocal thing. Like, we want to, support these causes, spread the word, let all of our team members know about it, and boost the queer culture at Target. But it's important that it's also beneficial for them and that they see something from it.
I love the point that Alexandra put in the chat about relating to the last question in terms of how to engage with maybe where it's a little bit hard to get a hold of sometimes, and really leveraging some existing connections through folks who already work or volunteer there, because a lot of it is relationship driven. And to Stephanie's point, they are stretched so thin, and they work their resource structures are very different than what you might find in a corporate environment. And so it's just a good reminder of saying, hey, there's ways to build that and build those connections so that we're able, to kind of have the greatest impact we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I'm not seeing any more questions roll in. Definitely, I believe the chat stays open, so definitely add things in there, and I'll be checking it throughout the rest of the conference to see if I can help answer questions, and love to connect. This has been super fun. Also remind you to take the survey about this presentation, because we really love getting feedback.
Yeah, no, thank you all for spending time. I'll put in another plug for Assortment for All on the Summit on Demand. Definitely worth checking that out. I'm super glad we got to spend some time with you. Kudos to Stephanie for being a part of pulling something that really leaned into the virtual environment and said, hey, how can we continue to do good, even if it looks a little bit different than it used to? And then, I will say the downside is I wish I could have seen your faces, heard your voices, but really appreciate the time you've spent here today, and enjoy the rest of the conference, everyone, and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.